I want you to imagine a love so overpowering, so entirely obsessive that it literally threatens to collapse an entire government.
Right, a total institutional breakdown.
Exactly. We are talking about a story that has it all. Vicious, calculated bullying in the inner corridors of a royal palace, a world leader completely paralyzed by grief, a secret prophecy, and a child so impossibly gifted it almost seems supernatural. Welcome to today's deep dive. I am your host.
And I am your expert guide. And I have to say, this narrative carries the tension of a modern political thriller, yet the text you are holding in your mind today is actually the foundational pillar of Japanese literature.
It really is. Today, our deep dive is taking us straight into the opening chapter, which is called Kiritsubo of the Tale of Genji, authored by Murasaki Shikibu. We are looking specifically through the lens of the modern Japanese translation by Akiko Yosano,
Yes, the Yosano translation.
because Yosano's translation is, well, it's particularly brilliant because it captures that delicate, suffocating, high-end atmosphere while making the psychological stakes feel incredibly immediate.
It does. Yosano brings out the razor-sharp edges of Murasaki's prose. When you read this specific translation, you realize this isn't merely a romantic tragedy. It is a rigorous dissection of power, vulnerability, and the catastrophic ripple effects of unchecked human emotion within a closed bureaucratic system.
Which brings us to the mission of this deep dive. We are going to unpack the dramatic, politically fraught origins of literature's most famous protagonist. We're going to explore how a dangerous mix of political exposure, intense palace rivalries, and blinding grief set the stage for the creation of the character known as the Shining Lord. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really dive into the mechanics of this story, you have to look at the architectural and social geography of the Heian Palace. Our scene opens with the Kiritsubo consort. Now, you probably know the hierarchy of the court. She is a kui.
A lower-ranking consort.
Right, rather than a Nyogo, who would be drawn from the absolute highest echelons of the aristocracy. But her rank isn't even her greatest liability here. Her fatal flaw in this ecosystem is that her father, who was a high-ranking court official, is dead.
That detail is everything. I mean, in a metrolocal society where a woman's leverage is inextricably tied to the political muscle of her male relatives, having a dead father means she is operating without a net. She has zero political backing.
None at all.
Yet, against all precedent, she is the emperor's absolute favorite.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the emperor is committing a massive political transgression here. He isn't just showing a romantic preference. He is disrupting the entire factional equilibrium of the court.
Yeah.
By elevating a woman without the requisite aristocratic pedigree or factional backing, he is completely bypassing the established power brokers. These are men who rely on their daughters to secure influence over the throne.
And the blowback is immediate and ruthless. The jealousy from the other women, particularly the high-ranking Kokiden consort, is just suffocating. But Murasaki Shikibu doesn't just tell us they were jealous. She uses the literal geography of the palace to demonstrate it.
The physical space itself.
Exactly. You have to picture the layout. The Kiritsubo consort's quarters are in a pavilion at the far corner of the palace. So to reach the emperor, she constantly has to walk past the pavilions of her highest-ranking rivals.
It forces her to run a physical gauntlet every single time she is summoned. The architectural layout itself becomes a weapon of psychological warfare.
The source text gives us these incredibly vivid, tactile details of the harassment, too. You see rival factions intentionally locking the doors in the connecting corridors to physically trap her as she passes through.
It's brutal.
And you see them maliciously arranging for the hems of her ladies-in-waiting's beautiful kimonos to be ruined on the bridges. It is coordinated, it's physical, and it's deeply humiliating.
Taking that a step further, the court's hatred of the Kiritsubo consort goes far beyond interpersonal jealousy. The highest officials actually view her as an existential threat to the state. The text explicitly points out that the court begins whispering comparisons to Yang Guifei.
The famous Tang Dynasty concubine.
The very same. You know the history there. The Chinese emperor's obsession with Yang Guifei's beauty allegedly distracted him so entirely from his duties that it sparked the An Lushan Rebellion, nearly destroying the empire.
Wow.
So when the Heian officials compare the Kiritsubo consort to Yang Guifei, they aren't complimenting her beauty, they are issuing a dire political warning. They are signaling that the emperor's infatuation is a destabilizing force that could provoke a literal rebellion.
It's an absolute pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And right in the middle of this toxic, highly surveilled environment, the Kiritsubo consort gives birth to a son, the emperor's second prince, Yosano's translation describes this child as stunningly beautiful, almost unnervingly perfect.
A prodigy from birth.
But the triumph of producing a male heir is entirely overshadowed by the mother's collapsing physical and mental health. The relentless bullying and isolation break her. She falls gravely ill and desperately begs the emperor to let her return to her family home to recover.
Which places the emperor in an agonizing position. His attachment to her is so profound that he is terrified to let her out of his sight, even as staying in the palace is visibly killing her.
The deathbed scene is one of the most tragic sequences in the text. At first, the emperor flat out refuses to let her leave. He invokes a deeply emotional, almost desperate vow they made to go on the journey of death together.
Right, that shared journey.
But she is incredibly weak, practically unable to speak. Finally, he relents, and she leaves the palace in a carriage with her weeping mother. She passes away at midnight, shortly after arriving home.
The immediacy of that loss triggers a reaction from the emperor that immediately plunges the government into the exact crisis the court officials had been fearing.
The emperor is entirely consumed. We aren't just talking about a period of mourning. We are talking about total administrative paralysis. He ignores his morning state affairs. He refuses to eat.
A complete shutdown.
He isolates himself completely, spending his days staring blankly at scroll paintings of Yang Guofei and obsessively reading Baijuzi's Song of Everlasting Sorrow. He is burying himself in the poetry of a doomed, empire-shattering romance.
Consider the implications for the bureaucracy. The officials are watching the mechanism of the state grind to a halt because the sovereign is incapacitated by grief for a lower-ranking consort. It validates every single whisper about the Yang Guofei parallel. Personal grief has directly manufactured a constitutional crisis.
And while the government is stalling, the Kokitan consort, who is the primary architect of the bullying, is actively flexing her political dominance. The text describes her pettily playing loud music late at night while the emperor is weeping.
Such a striking image.
It's not just a lack of empathy, it is a calculated display of power. She is showing you, the listener, and the entire court that she is entirely untouched by his grief and completely unbound by any respect for the woman who died.
That late-night music is a brilliant literary detail. It underscores the cold, mechanical reality of the political factions at play. And when you look at those factions, the text presents a fascinating chessboard.
It really does.
You have the political wing aligned with the Minister of the Right, which includes the Kokitin consort, heavily entrenched and fiercely protecting the status of the firstborn prince. Then you have the opposing locus of power aligned with the Minister of the Left. These bureaucratic titans are constantly maneuvering for supremacy, viewing every birth, death, and imperial favor purely as variables in their strategic equations.
And walking right into the middle of that dangerous equation is the young prince, the son of the late Kiritsubo consort. He is growing up in the palace, and the text emphasizes that he possesses an intellect and a physical grace that are entirely unmatched. He's a prodigy. And this is the moment the emperor makes a highly unorthodox move.
A move that requires profound secrecy.
There is a Korean delegation visiting the capital, residing at the Kurokan guest house. Among them is a renowned physiognomist, an expert in reading faces to predict destinies. The emperor secretly sends the young prince to the Kurokan, but disguises the boy as the son of a common official. He wants an unvarnished reading, completely free from the sycophancy of the court.
The disguise, however, is immediately penetrated by the sheer presence of the child.
The Korean expert is absolutely floored. He delivers a prophecy that is incredibly specific and deeply troubling. He states that the boy has the face of a sovereign. He is marked by destiny to rule.
But there's a catch.
A huge catch. The expert warns that if the boy were to actually take the throne, it would plunge the nation into chaos and bring him to total ruin. The alternative path, the expert says, is that the boy is destined to be a pillar of the state, the highest echelon of bureaucratic leadership, supporting the throne rather than sitting upon it.
What's fascinating here is the emperor's internal processing of this prophecy. It forces him to confront the stark, brutal reality of high-end court politics. He looks at his brilliant, beloved son and has a heartbreaking realization. The boy's mother is dead. His maternal grandfather is dead. He has no factional shield.
If the emperor were to name this unprotected child as the crown prince, he wouldn't be giving him power, he would be painting a massive target on his back.
Precisely the opposite of protection. The faction aligned with the Minister of the Right, spearheaded by the Kokitan consort, views the boy as an existential threat to their own bloodline's claim to the throne. They would mobilize their entire political apparatus to destroy him.
So the emperor executes a masterstroke of political strategy that must have absolutely gutted him as a father. To save his son's life, he removes him from the royal family entirely. He officially demotes the prince, stripping him of his royal status, making him a commoner, and granting him the surname Minamoto, which can also be read as Genji.
It is a brilliant paradox. By stripping his son of the ultimate power, he guarantees his survival. It is a profound act of parental sacrifice masquerading as a demotion. He is ensuring that Genji can fulfill the prophecy of becoming a pillar of the state without living under the constant looming threat of factional assassination.
The emperor secures Genji's physical safety, but his own emotional landscape is still entirely shattered by the loss of the Kiritsubo consort, which leads us to a massive psychologically complex twist. The emperor discovers a new royal consort to bring into the inner palace, Princess Fujitsubo.
And we know why she is chosen.
Right? The sole reason she is elevated to this position is that she is a near-perfect physical doppelganger for his dead love.
It is a breathtakingly dangerous psychological dynamic. He is importing a living ghost into the palace. He is trying to replace the irreplaceable, attempting to soothe his political and personal anxieties by projecting the identity of a dead woman onto a living princess.
And the collateral damage of this projection lands squarely on young Genji. Genji, who is always by his father's side, is naturally drawn to Fujitsubo. He is constantly told by the court that she is the spitting image of the mother he never knew. Yosano's translation highlights this desperate, aching need in Genji to be close to her.
Which the emperor encourages.
Entirely blind to the risks, he actively encourages their intimacy. He tells Fujitsubo to be warm to the boy, fostering a dynamic where they treat each other almost like mother and son, despite being very close in age.
The emperor thinks he is creating a healing family dynamic, providing comfort for himself and a maternal figure for his son. In reality, he is fostering an intense emotional intimacy between an incredibly charismatic, gifted young man and his own beautiful young consort. It is an astonishingly blind spot for a man who just engineered such a brilliant political demotion.
It sets a ticking clock on Genji's emotional life, which collides directly with his formal entry into adulthood. When Genji turns 12, he undergoes his Genpuku, the coming-of-age ceremony. The text describes this in lavish, almost overwhelming detail.
It's a huge production.
The emperor personally directs every element of the ritual, and it's a deeply poignant scene. The emperor openly weeps as Genji's beautiful childhood hair is cut and tied up into the formal style of an adult man. He is weeping because he desperately wishes the Kiritsubo consort were alive to witness their son's triumph.
The poetic exchange during this ceremony perfectly encapsulates that dual layer of public spectacle and private mourning.
It really does. The emperor sends a poetic verse referencing the tied hair, using it as a metaphor for a binding promise for the future. It's a moment of immense public pride, yet it is completely saturated with this unresolved grief.
But you have to remember, the Genpuku isn't merely a cultural rite of passage. It is the moment a young man officially enters the political chessboard. And this is where the emperor lays down the final, definitive piece of his protective strategy for Genji. As part of his coming of age, Genji is married. He is arranged to wed Lady Ai, the older daughter of the minister of the left.
The ultimate power play.
It is a staggering bureaucratic maneuver. By arranging this marriage, the emperor structurally aligns Genji with the minister of the left. This minister commands a massive locus of power, serving as the direct counterbalance to the minister of the right and the Kokiden faction.
So he's completely shielded now.
Exactly. The emperor takes a boy who is fatally vulnerable due to a lack of maternal backing and surgically grafts him onto the most powerful political family in the capital.
So what does this all mean? The emperor has effectively engineered a reality where Genji is completely untouchable. He is a commoner, so the minister of the right no longer views him as a threat to the throne. Yet he is the son-in-law of the minister of the left, granting him an impenetrable political shield. He possesses genius intellect, unparalleled beauty, immense wealth, and now absolute political security.
He has been architected into a perfectly protected entity. He has the freedom to maneuver through the Heian court with a level of invulnerability that no one else possesses.
And yet, despite having this politically impeccable new wife and a beautifully renovated, sprawling mansion at Niji waiting for him, Genji's internal compass is entirely broken. He's 12 years old, his new wife is older and emotionally distant, and his heart remains completely anchored in the imperial palace.
Where Fujitsubo is.
Right. He has no interest in the political security of his new life. He only wants to be near Fujitsubo, his father's consort, and his mother's phantom lookalike.
He is physically and politically secure, but emotionally, He is tethered to a completely unattainable and highly forbidden figure. The emperor's strategy solved the political crisis, but inadvertently created an emotional one.
The public, however, only sees the flawless exterior. The court is so enamored by his grace and perfection that they begin calling him the Shining Lord, or Hikaru Kimi. And in a perfectly balanced poetic parallel, they refer to Fujitsubo as the princess of the shining sun. In the eyes of the Heian capital, they are the two brightest celestial bodies in the court's orbit.
So if we step back and synthesize the material in this opening chapter, what you are really looking at isn't just an ancient prologue about a handsome prince. It is a rigorous masterclass in human vulnerability and systemic power.
Absolutely.
It demonstrates how a lack of political backing can literally be a death sentence in a ruthless bureaucracy. It shows how profoundly personal grief can paralyze an entire state apparatus. And most importantly, it reveals how a father's desperate, paradoxical attempt to protect his son resulted in creating a perfectly shielded commoner with unmatched influence and absolutely zero boundaries.
It is deeply relatable when you pull back the high-end aesthetics. Think about the dynamics at play here in your own life. Navigating intense factional environments, the absolute necessity of having a mentor or a powerful backer to shield you from internal politics, and the chaotic, unpredictable ripple effects that happen when deep human emotions clash with professional structures.
That's remarkably modern.
These are universal mechanisms of power. You see vividly how having no connections leaves you entirely exposed, and how the right alliance can change your reality overnight.
The human element, the psychology of power and protection never changes. Only the architecture of the court does. But this raises an important question, something for you to mull over as we conclude our deep dive into the origins of the Shining Lord.
Let's hear it.
The emperor thought he was executing a flawless long-term strategy. He believed he was perfectly protecting Genji by removing him from the line of succession and marrying him into the fortress of the left minister's family. But by bringing the Kiritsubo look-alike, Fujitsubo, into the inner palace, and by actively encouraging young Genji's emotional attachment to her to soothe his own lingering grief. Did the emperor actually plant the seeds of an even more dangerous, inescapable emotional trap for his supposedly safe son?